The families of those killed in the downed plane in Iran are facing competing narratives tonight about what led to the deaths of their loved ones. Iran does not believe what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said yesterday about an Iranian missile shooting down the Ukraine Airlines flight, killing all 176 people on board, many of them Canadians. It categorically denies it.
We are, in fact, confident from our side that there has been no missile launched in that area at that time.
Iran accuses Canada and the U.S. of rushing to judgment. It's highly suspicious of the intelligence that's not been made public. It warns it will take years to complete the investigation, though a state news agency in Iran said it plans to announce preliminary results tomorrow. At the disaster site, much of what's left of the plane has been cleared away. There are reports bulldozers were brought in barely 2 days after the plane came down, and that's raising questions about how careful and thorough the investigation will be. Ukraine's government says its investigators are at the site and that if the plane was shot down, it will demand all those responsible be held accountable and the victims' families be compensated. A team from the Canadian Transportation Safety Board is en route to Iran. It's unclear what access they will have. All of this, more agony for loved ones of the victims. We have complete coverage tonight from Ukraine, Ottawa, and Washington. We begin in London with Redmond Shannon and what we know about the investigation.
This is where many of the answers lie. The flight data recorder showing how the plane moved and operated before the crash, and the voice recorder which will tell investigators what the pilots were saying in the flight's final moments. Iran says it could take up to 2 months to extract the data. When Canadian investigators arrive in Iran, they want full access to the black boxes, amid concerns Iran has been refusing to cooperate.
We will come to our conclusions. We don't want to come to them right now.
But Ukraine's foreign minister said his team in Iran will now get to analyse the data and get to access the bodies and the wreckage. For now, though, Ukraine is holding back on who's to blame. More Western leaders have echoed Canada, saying intelligence suggests an Iranian missile struck the plane.
So I will not go into details about our intelligence, but what I can say is that we have no reason to not believe the reports we have seen from different NATO allied capitals.
Tehran is demanding the West reveal that intelligence. The head of Iran's civil aviation organization says there were no missiles, only that the plane was on fire before it hit the ground. And Iran's state media has been highlighting known issues with the type of engine used on the plane. In an interview with Sky News, Iran's UK ambassador dismissed accusations that teams bulldozed crucial evidence from what is a crime scene.
Can you make a judgment yourself?
On Iranian state TV, we've seen bulldozers clearing the area. That doesn't normally happen after a plane accident, does it?
The accidents, plane accidents, are a very technical issue.
In the coming days and weeks, the lack of trust between Iran and the West could be strained even further as both sides call on each other for openness and transparency in the investigation. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In Ukraine, the demands for answers are growing, as are tributes to the victims. Our new Europe Bureau Chief, Gomansingh, is at Kyiv's International Airport. Crystal, what's it been like there today?
Donna, throughout the day, it has been a constant wave of mourners. Some stand and look at the memorial, others cry silently, but everyone who walks by stops and pauses.
The display is as beautiful as it is tragic. One young man stood staring for a long time.
Denise, for me, shocked.
He moved to make room for others who came to pay their respects, but his eyes remained fixed on the memorial the whole time. He lost his childhood friend in the crash.
Wonderful face with big heart.
The president, Vladimir Zelensky, met with the families of the 11 Ukrainian victims. He has vowed to find out the truth. Families of the 63 Canadian victims are also relying on Ukraine. 45 Ukrainian security officials and aviation experts are at the crash site in Iran and are anxious to go through the black boxes now that Iran has granted them access.
Now, it is worth noting that Kyiv has stopped all flights to Iran and Iraq until after the investigation. Officials in this country also want the black boxes to be brought back here to be analyzed in an effort to get to the truth. Donna?
All right, Crystal Goomansingh in Ukraine tonight, thanks. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met privately with some loved ones of the victims today. One of them is an Ontario man who lost his wife and his son in the crash. He says he shared an emotional moment with the Prime Minister. And this is what he said when asked about how he wants his family to be remembered.
Point of my house, I can hear the walking and the running. My wife was an angel. All the world has to know that I had a wonderful, amazing son. He spoke 4 languages, Taekwondo champion. Always he said, I'm gonna be Justin Trudeau. I said, okay, trusting you to go to the school. I cannot.
So much grief. His wife, Shakiba Faghati, and his son, Rostan Moghadam, died in the crash. It was their first trip back to Iran since the family moved to Canada 7 years ago. There are so many people affected by this, and they deserve answers. What's not clear is how much influence the Canadian government can have on Iran. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, joins me from Ottawa. David, how concerned are Canadian authorities about the way Iran will handle this investigation and the evidence?
Well, I think that's one of the first things that the Canadians will learn when the Canadian investigators get to the crash site. They're going to be able to assess what kind of job the Iranians did preserving evidence, and they'll understand what their first steps will be.
It won't be a complex investigation if it turns out that, as some people have suggested, the plane was shot down by presumably a ground-to-air missile.
But Iran may be able to limit what Canadian investigators can actually do and what information they see. The rules set down by the United Nations agency responsible for civil aviation says Canada's experts are entitled to visit the scene, have access to relevant information approved for public release by the state conducting the investigation, in this case that's Iran, and receive a copy of the final report. But that's it. Anything more is up to Iran's discretion. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister says it is in Iran's interest to let investigators do whatever they need to do.
I think that transparency, accountability will be essential to provide the answers that the family and I would think the international community want.
The best thing Iran could do would be to give the Canadians access to the 2 black boxes it recovered.
Canada is one of the expert nations in the world at reading these things. So if we get our hands on it, if the Iranian government is good enough to give it to Canada, I know we can do a wonderful job of interpreting this data.
David, the other delicate and sensitive part of this is returning the remains of the victims to loved ones. How is that likely to proceed?
Well, one of the Canadian teams that's waiting right now in Turkey to get into Iran is tasked specifically with repatriation. And it's going to be a challenging task because the problem here is that, sadly, a plane crash like this means many of the bodies will not be intact. And right now, the preferred method of identifying remains is using DNA tests, and that takes time. So I'm told it could be months before all the victims are returned to Canada, and a major complicating factor here, the site no longer appears to be secure, Donna.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. In Washington, the Trump administration's justification for killing a top Iranian general, which is what led Iran to start firing missiles in revenge, keeps changing. Whether Qassem Soleimani posed an imminent threat or not is simply not clear. And was the downing of the Ukraine Airlines flight an unintended consequence of President Trump ordering Soleimani's death? The plane fell from the sky hours after Iran fired those missiles in a revenge attack. Jackson Proskow on how the story keeps shifting in Washington.
Even while announcing new sanctions on Iran, the Trump administration struggled to get its story straight about why it killed Iranian General Qassem Soleimani, an act that touched off chaos in the Middle East.
I don't know exactly which minute. We don't know exactly which day it would have been executed, but it was very clear. Qassem Soleimani himself was plotting a broad, large-scale attack against American interests, and those attacks were imminent.
That's as close as the U.S. Secretary of State would come to defining an imminent threat, contradicting President Trump's claims about an alleged Iranian plot against the U.S., which have grown more elaborate by the day.
We did it because they were looking to blow up our embassy.
I can reveal that I believe it would have been 4 embassies.
That's more detail than members of Congress were given during a series of classified briefings this week, and flies in the face of the vice president's claims that details couldn't be released even to the highest-ranking lawmakers.
If we were to share all of the intelligence, it could compromise those sources and methods.
Jackson, what's the White House saying about the downing of the Ukrainian jet and how it might be linked to the conflict with Iran?
Well, Donna, for his part, President Trump has called this a tragedy but hasn't said much else about the victims. The White House, though, has been very forthcoming with its suspicions about Iran shooting down the plane. Yesterday, the president suggested it was perhaps accidental, but also said the aircraft was flying through what he called a rough neighborhood. Now, the officials at the White House did announce new sanctions on Iran today, but they say they will issue waivers for Americans and other foreign citizens who are currently traveling to Iran to help with the investigation. Donna?
Jackson in Washington, thanks. Boeing is facing more turbulence tonight. Hundreds of internal emails and texts from employees have been made public, and they reveal the chaos and incompetence inside the company over the 737 MAX series jets. In the messages, Boeing employees talk about misleading U.S. regulators and appear to joke about potential safety flaws. The jet has been grounded for nearly 10 months after two separate deadly plane crashes killed 346 people. All of the messages were sent between 2013 and 2018, months before the worldwide flight ban. In one note, an employee says this airplane is designed by clowns, who in turn are supervised by monkeys. In another exchange, a worker says, "Would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft? I wouldn't." The documents were given to Congress as part of an investigation into the certification of the jets. We know there are polar opposite narratives emerging about what happened to the Ukrainian Airlines passenger plane. The evidence Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and American officials say they've seen indicates an Iranian surface-to-air missile shot it down. That intelligence is not being made public. Iran says it's not true. So how can we get at the truth? Well, there's all sorts of open-source information available online. And as Mike Drolet explains, a group called Bellingcat is highly skilled at combing through it.
In the hours after the crash of PS-752, Iran scrambled to control the narrative, insisting the cause of the tragedy was mechanical failure. International experts were delayed access to the site, and evidence was bulldozed away. But what they didn't count on were ordinary Iranians, and the litany of photos and videos they'd post online.
Actually, I think you'd be surprised there was a lot of information that came out from this event. They went out with their cell phones and they started recording and they started uploading on their Instagram accounts, Twitter.
It's that information the online investigative group Bellingcat used to search for the truth. They were able to quickly debunk the claim that this picture showed shrapnel holes in the fuselage. It was just mud. It was this video that led them to believe the plane was struck by a missile. They cross-referenced the video with satellite and street images, and then using the plane's transponder information in trigonometry, they were able to determine where the video was shot.
We're confident that it's from that location. We're 100% sure that the video was taken in that location.
With the limitless reach of social media, former national security analyst Stephanie Carvin says Iran is in a tough spot, but she fully expects the regime to try and muddy the waters.
The only response they really have is, constant denial, disinformation, trying to challenge, authoritative sources. And that's the kind of playbook that Russia really did establish in the wake of MH17. I strongly suspect that Iran will be following suit.
Iran was quick to clean up the wreckage, and with it all the evidence. Bellingcat responded by archiving every online clue it could. Before they can study it, they need to store it. And now they're focused on geolocating these pictures, purportedly showing part of a missile, but little else in the way of clues.
This is not going to be easy to find.
It's proven to be very difficult so far. I wouldn't say that it's impossible, but it's not as easy as the explosion.
They're counting on the online community for help, scouring Google Earth to prove the images are real and shine the light of truth on a tragedy. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.